Hey everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row. This is the Byers Auto practice report. The Buckeyes are a couple days removed from that 22-point win over Rutgers, getting ready for a trip to Maryland, the last place that they played a Big Ten game that was decided by single digits. They'll take on the Terrapins on Saturday afternoon. Spencer Holbrook and I will be hitting the road later this week to head over there for that one. But we've also just now talked with Ryan Day and a handful of Buckeyes about some final evaluations over that win over Rutgers and how they're preparing now to maybe play a more complete effort on Saturday against Maryland. And Spencer, just for me, that felt like a very annoyed football team. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but they knew that they could have won that game by more on Saturday night, but they're also not really that upset or troubled by it.
Yeah, they were annoyed with the questions about trick plays and about what went wrong against Rutgers because they were up by just so much at different times. They were up 35-3, 42-9. Pick when you want to pick. They were up big in that game, and to get all those questions now, it's kind of, I guess, disingenuous from people like us to say it, because I don't think they really cared when the scoreboard says 42-9 and there's nobody in the stands and it's 10:30 on the East Coast. Like it's just hard to have that GSF that you need to play in the third and fourth quarter, I guess.
Yeah, to borrow a Schlegelism there, it's also, I think it's not unfair if anyone wants to criticize it and ask about areas that Ohio State can improve. Certainly you and I have done that and will continue to do that. I don't think that the secondary is a finished product. I think that maybe that can be corrected with just playing more Josh Proctor. Maybe that means Ryan Watts after what he did in that second half and showed maybe you can take some value out of that. Shaun Wade talked, and he answered the bell as a captain that he's given up a couple touchdowns in the last couple weeks. He is not playing like a first-round draft pick right now, and he knows that. He didn't shy away from it, but he wasn't sulking about the questions. He was talking about the ways that he knows he can improve. And, he broke down what he was thinking on the throw to that tight end in the Rutgers game that wound up being a touchdown, that he can – sometimes he's going for the interception. I think maybe that's some of the NFL creeping into his mind and trying to pad his stats and look really good, and he needs to take a PBU once in a while or change the way he's jumping in to defend a route. He broke all that down. He didn't say, hey, stop it, I'm playing great. He knows that he could have done better, and I think that's where the annoyance comes in for Ohio State. Shaun Wade is an example of that. He's going to be just fine. Ohio State won easily. All they want to do is win games. That's what matters to them. And yet, sure, if they're breaking down the snaps, which they are, they can see that they can play better.
Yeah, there's kind of like the typical Clemson approach to this Ohio State team this year, where Clemson goes through the ACC and just says, as long as we win by 1 point, we're going to be in the playoff. You win, you're in. And so this team just kind of wants to win, and it doesn't really matter how. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Shaun Wade even said, I think verbatim, I don't care if I play bad. If we win a natty, that's all that matters.
Yeah, that is.
So if they win, then that's fine. And I think that is part of the annoyance, where they know they can get better, but at the same time they're winning. So it's kind of a weird balance to strike with that the place that they're in right now is kind of awkward.
Well, and everything kind of collided at once. I think if the reason that we continue to talk about the secondary is that that unit historically plays at such a high level, it probably isn't that big of a deal the way they played against Rutgers, but the second half against Penn State, the second half against Rutgers, and then looking forward now to this Saturday, when you're looking for areas where Maryland could potentially exploit Ohio State, or that they will try to at least. I mean, you're looking at a younger Tagovailoa, Rakim Jarrett, a passing attack. I think it was around 276 yards per game that Maryland is throwing for right now. And obviously we can debate the merits of some of those first two opponents. And I also remember that they're 2 weeks removed from scoring 3 points against Northwestern. But that's how they're going to try to attack Ohio State. And I think that's maybe why there's so much attention on, where does Ohio State go? Because you're not going to have Cam Brown. Marcus Hooker's missed some tackles. It's, there is some uncertainty in the secondary.
Yeah, and like you said, Maryland has the younger Tagovailoa, however you say. They have the younger Tua. They have Rakim Jarrett in
Little
that
Tua,
system.
as everyone is calling him.
Yeah, they have Rakim Jarrett in that system. I mean, like that's pretty good. And Mike Loxley seems to have something going, I guess. I know you don't want to give any credit to him, and I don't really care to either, but he seems to have something going in the right direction the last two games. And Sean Wade, again, he was very honest with us today. It's probably the most honest he's ever been with us. He said Maryland is legit. They pose a threat to this secondary. And I think that's something that, if nothing else about this upcoming week, the secondary and the defensive line have to be on high alert, because he can get out of the pocket, he can make plays in the scramble drill, and the wide receivers are playmakers.
Yeah, so let's run through some of the other updates. We get Ryan Day coming off of the game. There's a lot of good information to parse there. I wanted to use my opportunity with the questions to zone in on the running backs and the situation there with Trey Sermon, because, man, that was the best. It's crazy how that worked out, even for these Buckeyes, that was the best that Trey Sermon had looked on that drive in the fourth quarter all season, and then it ends with him having to be helped to the sideline and injured. So I know that Ryan Day waits until the end of the week to make any decisions, but I did get the impression that if it hadn't been in the end of the game, maybe Trey Sermon could have come back in, but at a minimum, Ohio State is expecting him to practice this week. Generally, that's a good sign that he would be available, and I think that that still remains really important, because that version that they were seeing before he left the game was pretty darn good. That was the one that you and I have talked about for months, how he could help this offense. And the flip side is that they're probably not ready to give Steel Chambers a larger role in this offense after those two fumbles.
Yeah, Trey Sermon looked really good on that drive. It was almost like they made it a focal point to get him going on that drive. They wanted to make sure that his confidence wasn't shaken, that he wasn't upset with the way he's been playing. And he's got some naysayers now. There are people out there who are questioning his ability, and I think that's going to drive him, because he seems like the kind of guy that's really competitive, because you have to be to play running back at Ohio State. And I think that you'll see him get going as long as he's healthy, just because we're starting to run through some arm tackles that he wasn't running through those first 2 weeks. He was starting to run with some good pad level, like the things that you can imagine Tony Alford's been saying to him. It looked like it started to come together in that fourth quarter. I can't see him having another lackluster performance. I just think he's bound to break out at some point, because he is really talented.
Yeah, and I think that it's a matter of time for him, and it's a matter of comfort. It's easy sometimes to forget that, because I talked about him, you and I both did, about how talented he was, how it seemed like a perfect fit, and that you should expect that it's going to happen right away. I was guilty of that. I did that on bold predictions the last couple of weeks with him scoring touchdowns, just because I feel like it should be there. I feel like it's coming. But when you're a transfer, when you're coming off of an injury a year ago, when you don't have non-conference games to get acclimated to the system, he was never going to have a spring ball with the Buckeyes. Then he had a weird training camp. It helps you, it helps me anyway, to put it in context. All right, well, maybe that's why he's not, taking it to an elite level early on. The same could be said, for Master Teague coming off an Achilles injury. This is the first time that he's been the featured back. All those things, people were asking Ryan Day about that. Do you need more from the rushing attack? Do you need more balance? Well, they're running for over 200 yards a game. And they haven't even really been relying on Justin Fields to supplement that. He's not concerned about the rushing attack. So, I think we can see how, again, it's another one of those situations where you could see how it could be better. If Trey Sermon was breaking more tackles, if Master Teague, was maybe a little more quick with some moves or more elusive, there'd be some extra yards. But they're getting basically everything that Ryan Day would want out of it right now, and it could still be better.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we continue to overlook is Ohio State jumped out to a lead early in that second half against Nebraska, kind of packed it in, was really vanilla on offense. Didn't really show a lot in the run game, honestly. You look at the Penn State game, you go up 14-0 in the first 6 minutes of the game, and in the run game, it was kind of just inside zone and between the tackles. Last week, when they needed a play, they went to the outside zone. They got 15 yards out of it. It was with DeMario McCall, which was odd, but they went to that for, it seemed like, what was the first time this year. I still feel like they're just not showing a lot right now. And maybe that's just what Verm likes to say, scarlet colored glasses, because this team is so talented. But I just feel like that running game has been really vanilla. And when they expand the playbook, when they need to, and maybe they don't need to very often, but when they need to and they can expand that playbook, I feel like the running game has to take off, because there's too much talent in the backfield between Justin Fields, Trey Sermon, Master Teague, any of those guys you put in there. There's just too much talent to contain them, all of them, every game this year.
It is interesting the way, that DeMario McCall was used, because he's still most likely going to be based on the perimeter and with those wide receivers. And, if we're going to see more of the jet sweeps and ghost motion, he's an interesting guy to get to the edge. He's got to hang on to the football, and he's going to have to stay healthy and, fully committed to practice habits on a day in and day out basis. But you also, if I've been critical of him in the past for those reasons that I just named, it's also hard to argue with, a 12-yard rush around the left side. It was like, turning a catch and run, 27-yard reception on the next play. You don't ever turn your back on 39 yards on 2 touches. So he's an interesting dynamic. And if nothing else, that's on film and you just put him on the field, maybe that opens up something else for whether that's a back in the backfield or, Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. Not that they need a ton of help getting open as it is, but it's another interesting wrinkle. And the point is that it's another way that Ohio State can continue to incorporate more personnel, because they can do almost whatever they want on offense. And they have. They still scored 49 points on Saturday night without really breaking a sweat.
Yeah, and you haven't really seen anything other than the toe tap touchdown from Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's coming. You haven't seen anything really from Julian Fleming other than one catch and one stone hand drop. You haven't really. It was tough. I watched it a couple times on replay. I think he would have scored.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
He would have scored. But you haven't really seen a lot from these other wide receivers. And the more you put on film, the more you make people worry about, the more you make defenses worry about Trey Sermon, Master Teague, Justin Fields in the run game, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. If you can find a place for DeMario McCall and his speed on the field, all of those other options open up. And now you're seeing Ohio State turn to Jeremy Ruckert. Well, that opens up something else, because now you have to respect what Jeremy Ruckert's done, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. Everything else opens up. And so one thing builds off of another. Like you said, wrinkles build off of the other wrinkles. And this offense, I think, is going to be more exciting in the next 3-4 weeks than it was in the first 3.
Anything else that it tickled your fancy from that a couple hours talking with the Buckeyes this afternoon?
No, I think usually like Maryland, Rutgers, last week, Rutgers, they were definitely giving away some stuff that they probably wouldn't normally. I don't think I saw that from this week against Maryland. I think they know that Maryland looks improved. I think they know that Maryland is coming in pretty hungry. And it's a road game. So I just think that they're taking this game much more seriously than a typical Ohio State team might take a typical Maryland team.
Yeah, and after last week for me, I'm going to do the same thing for Maryland, and I'm not going to point out again the 3 points against Northwestern or a missed extra point against Minnesota or the fact that Penn State appears to have completely checked out on this season already. None of that matters. It's an improved Maryland team that can throw the football, and that's what's got Ohio State's attention, and that's what has mine. I'll talk about that all week, and I'll remember it for Friday's bold predictions and Saturday's score prediction. This, though, has been the Byers Auto Practice Report. Spencer and I, of course, wishing nothing but the best for the Birmingham family. Berm will be back soon. Don't worry, but put his family in your thoughts and prayers if you wish. I know that he would certainly appreciate it. We miss him. He'll be back soon to join us on the Byers Auto Practice Report. Spencer Holbrook, Austin Ward. Stay tuned for a lot more coverage of Ohio State at lettermenrow.com.